Is it time for colonizers to pay up? From the year 1 AD to 1000 AD, India was the richest country in the world, holding 30% global economy share. From the years 1000 AD to 1500 AD, India was sharing first position with China for GDP with global economy share of 24.4%. However, under the Mughal rule, India went to second place with economic share of 22.4%, and under the British rule in the 1800s, the share plummeted down to 16% globally, and by the time they left India, the share came down to 4.2%.
India's share of the world economy when Britain arrived on its shores was 23%. By the time the British left, it was down to below 4%. Why? Simply because India had been governed for the benefit of Britain. Britain's rise for 200 years was financed by its depredations in India. In fact, Britain's industrial revolution was actually premised upon the deindustrialization of India. The handloom weavers, for example, famed across the world, whose products were exported around the world, Britain came right in. There were actually these weavers making fine muslin, light as woven air, it was said. And Britain came right in, smashed their thumbs, broke their looms, imposed tariffs and duties on their cloth and products, and started, of course, taking the raw materials from India and shipping back manufactured cloth, flooding the world's markets with what became the products of the dark and satanic mills of Victorian England. That meant that the weavers in India became beggars, and India went from being a world-famous exporter of finished cloth into an importer, went from having 27% of world trade to less than 2%. By the end of the 19th century, the fact is that India was already Britain's biggest cash cow, the world's biggest purchaser of British goods and exports, and the source of highly paid employment for British civil servants. Staying with India, between 15 and 29 million Indians died of starvation in British-induced famines. The most famous example, of course, was the Great Bengal Famine during the Second World War, when 4 million people died because Winston Churchill, deliberately as a matter of written minuted policy, proceeded to divert essential supplies from civilians in Bengal to sturdy Tommies and Europeans as reserve stockpiles. He said that the starvation of anyway underfed Bengalis mattered much less than that of sturdy Greeks. This is Churchill's actual quote. No wonder that the sun never set on the British Empire, because even God couldn't trust the English in the dark.
What do you do when you make a mistake? You apologize, that's the first thing. But what if that mistake killed millions of people, impoverished millions more, plundered entire continents, and left generations with trauma? I don't think an apology cuts it then. And that's what former colonies are saying to European countries. A sorry is not enough. You need to pay up. And leading that charge is Barbados. Their Prime Minister is in the UK right now. Her name is Mia Mottley. And I must say, she's done her homework. She did not just make an appeal for reparations, she came with an exact figure. $4.9 trillion. That's how much she wants European countries to pay Barbados, $4.9 trillion. Most of it is for slavery. Around 450,000 slaves were trafficked to Barbados. Only 375,000 made it alive, and the rest, they died at sea. Around 30,000 slaves died working on the plantations. They died working for European powers. So Barbados wants the UK to pay up. How much do European countries owe for slavery? The numbers will surprise you. The UK owes $24 trillion to 14 countries. Barbados is one of them, $24 trillion for the UK. Spain, $17 trillion. France, $9 trillion. And the Netherlands, $4.8 trillion. Now, these numbers may sound like a lot. 24 trillion is 8 times the UK's national GDP. 17 trillion is 12 times the Spanish GDP. So how can these claims be realistic? Well, the Barbados Prime Minister has an answer. She says, don't take them out of context. This wealth was accumulated over decades and centuries. If you think like that, the numbers are small.
it's not just India and Barbados. Countries like South Africa, Haiti, and more have been asking for reparations for decades for all the goods, jewels, artifacts, and even people stolen from their country. But their colonizing countries have been denying or avoiding the topic completely. Barbados. Barbados, the birthplace of the British Slave Society and one of the most ruthlessly colonized by the British, making their fortunes from a so-called disposable workforce. But it wasn't just the British. Spanish raiders regularly seized large numbers of indigenous people from Barbados to be used as slave labor on regional plantations. All these factors have made this amount of $4.9 trillion. India. England stole a calculated $45 trillion from India, which is nearly 15 times more than England's current GDP. This sum was made up of gold, ivory, spices, silk, jewels, art, rice, tea, and even more, not to mention the countless slaves who were taken from their homes to serve their country's thieves.
Our next story is about Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, a base for dozens of armed gangs who even forced their prime minister to resign. Haiti always seems to be in a state of chaos. It's been that way since it became independent, back in 1804. But maybe that's not the country's fault completely. A group of NGOs has gathered in Geneva. They're trying to form an independent commission to help undo a historic justice. They want France to pay a ransom that it took from Haiti back in the 1800s, the price it extracted for Haiti's freedom. How much money does the coalition want France to pay? Anywhere between $150 to $200 billion. Here's our report.
Have you heard of the term war reparations? It's a specific type of payment given by a losing country to the winner of a war. This has always taken place in history. Germany paid this to the victorious Allies after World War II and after World War I as well. France paid this to Britain after Napoleon was defeated. War reparations are a way for the losing side to pay for the lives lost. This is how it has always been, the business side of war. But what if the roles were reversed? If the winner of a war had to pay the loser, even if the war was justified, if it was the morally right thing to do? We don't have to imagine that scenario. It's what happened to Haiti. And the country has been suffering for 200 years because of this. Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. It's a country in the Caribbean Sea. It occupies half of an island, Hispaniola. The other half is a different country, the Dominican Republic, where the people are, on average, 10 times richer than the Haitians. What led to this stark disparity? Simply put, France. Haiti was once a French colony, called Saint-Domingue. France filled it with sugar and coffee plantations, and slaves to work on them. By the year 1789, 90% of the people in Saint-Domingue were slaves, subjected to barbaric cruelty by the French colonizers. So the slaves rose up to break their shackles. They finally won their freedom from the French in 1804, after fighting for over a decade. The people even defeated Napoleon's armada, making a place for themselves in history. But the joy was short-lived. Napoleon was beaten in Europe as well. The French monarchy was restored, and they wanted their colony back. France sent another armada in 1825. 500 cannons were pointed at the now free nation of Haiti, and the French made them an offer at gunship point. Pay 150 million francs for your freedom, or we'll enslave and kill you again. Haiti was paying off the ransom for 122 years. The final payment was made in 1947. That is when Haiti was free of the French debt. So how much do you think the total debt was worth? Well, that is a question that will be debated by a United Nations group, the UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. 20 NGOs have come together. They're asking the forum for justice. They want France to return what it took from Haiti. When you add interest, it may be between $150 to $200 billion.
Haiti. The French gave Haitians a false independence. After giving Haitians their independence in 1804, due to many battles which the Haitians won, the French continued to tax the citizens of Haiti, and if they didn't pay the tax, they received war threats from the French. Approximately 345,000 Haitians were killed during this bloody massacre of a revolution. More so, the French harmed Haiti's natural environment and biosphere by adding extremely large amounts of sugar and coffee plantations. South Africa. Like other European powers, such as the Netherlands, Britain stole gold, ivory, rubber, coal, cotton, and diamonds, some of which still remain on the British crown jewels till date from South Africa. The British even stole ceremonial masks and used in rituals and cultural practices which didn't have any significant value or meaning to the British, but were priceless to the people of South Africa. Thank you for watching, and if you find this video informative, remember to like, share, and subscribe.